Welcome to Mortification of Spin, a casual conversation about things that count, with Carl Trueman and Todd Pruitt, a podcast of the Alliance of Confessing Evangelicals. Let's join this week's conversation.
You are listening to Mortification of Spin. My name is Todd Pruitt. I'm the pastor of Covenant Presbyterian Church in Harrisonburg, Virginia, and I'm joined, as always, by my friend Carl Trueman, who is professor at Grove City College in Western Pennsylvania. Carl, good to see you. Now, Carl, earlier as we were talking, of course, I can see you via the wonderful technology that we have in front of us. You are wearing a shirt that brings a tear to my eye. I am a native of Texas. Though I live in Virginia, I love Virginia. It's a wonderful suburb of Texas. There's a place. There will always be a piece of my heart in the Lone Star State, and I have to say, the dual realities. One, of you recently becoming a U.S. citizen, and secondly, you wearing a shirt that has an enormous Texas flag across the back, brings a tear of joy to my eyes. I'm filled with frivolity and happiness.
There's a story behind the shirt. A couple of weeks ago, I was giving some lectures at a church in Houston. On the self, and of course touching on LGBTQ issues, and American Airways kindly lost my luggage. And so the only thing I had to wear that morning to give the lecture, would you believe, was yesterday's shirt and my rainbow sweater that I love, that has no political connotations whatsoever. I just love my rainbow sweater. But you can imagine, I'm standing at the front wearing this rainbow sweater. There were all kinds of jokes being made.
Right.
So somebody took pity on me. And at lunchtime, I was presented with a couple of shirts that he'd gone out and bought, one of which has the Texas flag on the back. So in the afternoon, I got up on stage wearing my rainbow sweater. I declared, I'm a bit warm. I turned around, took my sweater off, revealed the Texas flag. The whole place went crazy.
Of course they did. The stars at night are big and bright.
It reminded me of that impromptu Willie Nelson concert I happened to be present at in Billy Bob's in Fort Worth many, many years ago, when Willie and the boys turned up out of nowhere, played a set. Wow. Halfway through the set, they dropped the Texas flag in front of the American flag, and the place went berserk. And just to prove I'm a genuine American, that night I was wearing a Stetson, plaid shirt, bolo tie, jeans, and cowboy boots.
Nice.
I was not wearing my Spurs, but I was wearing the boots.
Well, I'm going to send out a plea to anyone in the United States that may have a photograph from that evening with Carl dressed up in that garb, because we need that. That needs to be emblazoned on T-shirts and coffee mugs, etc. So that would be a great deal of fun to have. Well, speaking of fun, we have a returning guest, a good friend, Rosaria Butterfield. We want to talk to Rosaria about anything that pops into our mind, but also, Rosaria, you have a new book that's going to be coming out very soon. I wonder if you would just give us a quick preview of this new book. First of all, welcome. Thanks for coming back on.
Thank you. Thank you.
And tell us just a little bit about the new book.
Yeah. Well, the new book is called The 5 Lies of Our Anti-Christian Age, and it's coming out of Crossway. And the impetus behind the book is just a growing concern that a number of women have shared with me over the last couple of very tumultuous years, where the impact of Obergefell and Bostock, the 2 Supreme Court cases that have codified LGBTQ as not only the law of the land, but I would say the nation's reigning idol. Yeah. And what has happened in the midst of all of this, of course, is that the church, the visible church, is divided, and it's left people with a basic question, a basic cultural apologetics question, a basic faith and reason question. If Christ is not divided, why are we? And so I set out to answer that question. And I set out to answer that question in the spirit of the Reformation, right, which is a two-pronged foci, one on destroying the idols, tearing down the idols, and the other proclaiming the word of God faithfully. And so in the book, I answered that question. If Christ is not divided, why are we? By identifying 3 reasons that have produced 5 lies that the broad evangelical church has adopted wholesale and that the Reformed Church toys with all the time, and that I believed at some point in my life. I certainly believed these lies fully when I was an unbeliever, but many of them also bled into my approach to evangelism, my approach to my neighbors, and my approach to dodging my own sin. So the 3 reasons that we're in the place we're in.
Yeah, please.
Simply this, that the first is that we have failed to see that the seeds of the gospel are in the garden. We have just denied that the creation ordinance found in Genesis 1:27 has any bearing on evangelism. And you see that because all kinds of people talk about things. They just the whole totem of the gay Christian or even the gay person is, I think, proof of that. The second is that we don't seem to know what time we're living in. We just don't know what time it is. And most of us are not quite ready for memory care, but we have just failed to read the times. We've failed to see that the 3 exchanges of Romans 1 have taken root in both civil and federal law, and that we're no longer debating matters of terminology when we talk about something like the use of transgender pronouns. We're talking about tyranny and ideology.
Yeah.
The third reason is that, we're really sloppy with our categories, and we have confused becoming friends with the enemy with loving the enemy. And so those are the 3 reasons. And then the 5 lies that these have produced are, the first is, and it's funny because a couple of people have challenged me about the order, and I don't know. This is how I put them in this order, but we can debate it. The first is that homosexuality is normal, that it is a normal sexual variant, and therefore part of God's creational design. And that's just right out of some of the heretics that are speaking into this, that are getting nice reviews at Gospel Coalition and speaking at conferences. And I can name names because I love naming names. The second lie is that being a spiritual person is kinder than being a biblical Christian. And, this is work that Peter Jones and Josh Gilo and Mary Weller over at Truth Exchange have been doing for 20 years. So I'm not trying to steal their thunder. I just borrow a lot from them. It's the lie that says you can be non-binary when the Christian faith is indeed binary. The third lie is that feminism is good for the church and the world. And in this lie pretty much camps everybody I know these days, maybe not you guys, but you know what I mean? And
Sure.
And they carve it out differently, like, well, we really needed first wave feminism, but everything after that is bad. And I'm saying, no, you didn't need feminism to establish citizenship issues. Actually, the gospel is quite functional at that, and biblical law and other things. But what feminism has done in the church is it has functionally taken aim at biblical patriarchy. That means it takes aim at basically men and babies. And it's fascinating to me right now. There is really no feminism in the world. It has been completely taken over by transgenderism. The only place that feminism is alive and kicking and that people are really excited about it is the evangelical church, which is proof, I think, that evangelicalism is not opposing culture. It's almost like we're all running a marathon and they're about 10 miles behind the leaders. The fourth lie is that transgenderism is normal. And this lie really works downstream. It's so interesting to me because, of course, feminism produced its own death by believing that sex and gender were separate categories. And, we would agree that to introduce gender as a separate category of personhood, separate from a biological category of sex, is simply unnatural to the creation ordinance. And if it's unnatural to the creation ordinance, it's dangerous for the purposes for which God made us. But feminism, creating the seeds of its own demise, launched the rallying cry for transgenderism. And so this idea that transgenderism is normal, when indeed transgenderism is satanic. It is the sin of envy. It is the violation of the 10th commandment. It is deeply embedded right now in your federal government school through anti-bullying legislation. My husband and I have started, my husband's a pastor in the RPCNA, and he and I have started testifying before our North Carolina state legislature on behalf of bills and laws, trying to defend children against being castrated in the name of the 14th Amendment. But work that one out before a cup of coffee. But and it is a little scary, because while Kent and I have always been very forthright, obviously, it's a little different to do this stuff in your own zip code.
Sure.
When I tell you that this stuff is satanic, I am not kidding you. It is quite serious. And then the fifth lie is that modesty is an outdated burden that serves male dominance and holds women back. And instead of modesty, we should, punt for exhibitionism, especially, I say, on social media. So those are 5 lies that the evangelical church has bought wholesale. But I'm in no place to be too terribly arrogant or feel too puffed up about these, because I spent, at least half of my life. I'm 61 now, so I don't know how we're going to do the math, but I spent a good bit of my life defending and promoting and establishing these lies in culture and even in law. And then even as a Christian, I failed to do what I was called to do. A Christian is not to tolerate sin. A Christian is not to be a soft presence in the face of danger and dangerous ideas. And that's what I did for much of my Christian life as well. So a good bit of this book, at least the early part, is my own repentance. And I say that because I think Aiken is in the camp. We're living under judgment. It's not that, right. Kent always says this in his sermons. It's not that judgment is coming, welcome, it's right here. And part of it is that many of us, when we make a mistake and we're, embarrassed by it, we've written books that, it's in a book that sold 100,000 copies, oops, that's a little embarrassing. The temptation is just to want to course correct and say, well, I've learned my lesson. But I feel I'm pretty convicted that if it's a sin, we need to publicly repent. And so that's part of what the introduction does too. So that is, I don't know that was a nutshell, guys. That was my version of a nutshell.
Great. Yeah, no, that's helpful. And one of the thoughts that occurs to me is, and you alluded to this, is that so the culture will take 10 giant steps in the wrong direction, and instead of really resisting what I've noticed in contemporary, quote, Bible-believing evangelicalism, including otherwise, quote, conservative Reformed denominations, Presbyterian denominations, is that instead of a real confrontation against those things, there's enough of accommodation where we won't take the same 10 giant steps in the wrong direction, but we'll maybe take 3 steps, so that things that 10 years ago we said, well, yeah, we need to avoid that. That's wrong. Now all of a sudden has become acceptable, because in light of where the culture is, we're still to the right of it, but we're not where we were. It's like the Overton window.
Has
shifted for us. And we see this in places like Christianity Today.
Yep.
Which is advocating things it never would have advocated 10, 15, 20 years ago. Or think about the days of when Carl Henry was writing for Christianity Today.
Right.
And that, I think, Christianity Today and some of the voices at the Gospel Coalition, unfortunately, are sort of a barometer for an unfortunate direction in otherwise, quote, Bible-believing evangelicalism.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, just, everybody knows this, so it's not exactly a deep, dark secret, but my session won't let me write for Gospel Coalition. My session won't let me participate in whatever's going on at Christianity Today, whether they want to interview me on the new book or whatever. And part of it, that might sound really just, harsh, but there's almost no way to participate in the gospel of pluralism without being set up to be part of a foil in it.
Right.
And so, like, I'm fairly confident at this point. People know that my claws are out, and I'm pretty confident that no editor is going to want to edit the gospel out of something I've written. But what they'll do, likely, what these parachurch ministries do all the time, is they'll just set your, maybe strong article up against a very weak one, and then after the equal sign, you just get the gospel of pluralism, which, of course, David French has decided he's going to sell his soul to.
Right.
And, so I guess it's, for me, it's very important that Christians know where they're standing right now. There is no third way anymore. I used to love the third way. I wrote a book. I mean, I would say Openness Unhindered very much operates in that posture. I loved the idea, and I loved the idea of being a soft presence, of being a gentle participant in someone's coming to Christ. But unfortunately, currently with where we are, with let's say the Biden administration's Department of Justice leveling the 14th Amendment against laws to protect minors from castration.
Yeah.
And, and then, the recent, I can go on and on about, and what's recent right now will not even be recent by the time we finish this interview because of how crazy this is. But what I'm saying is, in a situation like this, to say something, to promote something like, oh, it's totally fine to put your kids in government schools. You just need to be a soft presence, which is, Jen Wilkin on the good faith debate, which was neither good nor faithful at the Gospel Coalition. And, that fails to read the times.
Yeah.
And what it dangerously does is suggests to already weak Christians that you can be a soft presence in Sodom, and somehow it's going to work out better than it did for Lot.
Yeah.
And so that's crazy.
Yeah.
And so I think that when we need to speak into this world, this book seeks to help moms and grandmas, because those are the people that contact me at my website. And they say things like, if I hear something like transgenderism and homosexuality is not God's best for you, I'm going to throw a brick at the head of the next person who says it.
Yeah.
Because my 3-year-old grandson is being raised as a girl by my non-binary daughter in a state where her rights are protected, and I can't call it child abuse.
Yes.
And for Christians to not stand forcefully in defense of that child and that woman is sin. Yeah. And so to have somebody like Preston Sprinkle say, how do I know if the fall, which he puts in scare quotes, which is its own, I wonder what that means, produced transgenderism. I wasn't in the garden. For anyone who calls himself a Christian to not defend that grandmother and defend that 3-year-old boy is a terrible sin. But these are all people who are part of, and this is where we three and maybe our audience needs to take seriously what it means to be Presbyterian.
Yeah.
Because that's where you worship is going to have a great deal of effect on how functional you are at war.
Yeah, yeah. It was very interesting that Pride Month kicked off with an editorial at Christianity Today criticizing the Uganda anti-gay laws that have recently been passed. Now, there's a debate to be had there. Right. I'm not an advocate for persecution, etc., etc. But on the other hand, as you pointed out, Rosaria, it's not exactly the most pressing issue for the American audience, what's happening in Uganda.
And unfortunately, Russell Moore, who wrote that article, actually mischaracterized the law.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's unfortunate. I think, I think when you are used to getting away with being Achan in the camp, I think that's what you're going to have there. Yeah, that was a terrible mischaracterization of that law. And since we are in the business of castrating, 14-year-olds, I wonder on what grounds we should criticize it anyway. But between that and
my news feed actually has just thrown up something from Reuters, Biden to host thousands at White House Pride Party. And apparently the party will also involve the announcement of new measures to help schools and LGBTQ kids navigate book bans, et cetera, et cetera. Now, I'm no fan of Donald Trump, but the men who made their money and their reputations from Trump bashing when Trump was actually in power, they need to speak.
Yes.
To use their trendy terminology, they need to speak some truth to power now. Yes. Donald Trump is not coming after your kids.
Right.
He's not coming after you. Maybe he will do at some point in the future. Who knows? He's not coming after your kids now.
Right.
There is a man in the White House who is doing that.
Right.
It would be great to have a really strong Christianity Today editorial, I think, exposing that, and pointing Christians and maybe offering Christians possible strategies to combat some of the evil and wicked policy and vice that's coming out of the current White House.
Right.
But it can't happen because their revenue base depends upon it.
Yeah, exactly.
You cannot be a parachurch ministry or a or a mega church.
Yeah.
You can, if you have made winsomeness the goal, because that third way is that wide middle road that you're going to set up your tents, there is no way, short of actually being a courageous Christian, and I think this really comes down to it for all of us. And Kent said this in a sermon a few weeks ago. He preached on transgenderism for the first time. I've been, my husband's been my pastor for over 20 years, and I never thought I'd see the day.
Yeah. Well, he's a good Presbyterian,
Exactly. Right. Yeah. Exactly. And that's where you feel like you worry about the visitors, but it's a little bit like coming to the First Reformed Presbyterian Church of Durham on a day when we're doing, a church discipline announcement.
Right.
But, he just said, oh, you're afraid of getting fired? Great. Go get fired.
Yeah.
I don't even want to, that is not an argument. That is not an argument that a Christian has.
Yeah.
That we are not here to protect our reputations. We are here to advance the cause of Christ. Many of us will lose not only our reputations, but our lives in the process. That's the real gospel.
Right.
And so I think that when you have a situation where you have, First John tells us to test the spirits. When some of these false spirits come under the name Jesus and are promoted by parachurch ministries like Christianity Today and Gospel Coalition, real Christians need to say something.
Yeah. I appreciate the fact that you frame these issues in terms of calling it what it is, which is, and Carl and I have talked about this on numerous occasions. Transgenderism is demonic. First of all, it begins with that demonic lie that you can be what you want to be, that you can overturn the will of the Creator, that what you desire can take precedence over the Creator, and you define reality. I mean, it goes all the way back. It's the ancient demonic lie, but it has with it now this additional evil aspect with the mutilation of healthy bodies, even our children. And that's why
children who aren't old enough to get tattoos, by the way,
exactly.
in any of the 50 states,
any
of the 50 states.
Yeah, they can be mutilated.
That would make a permanent change to their body, and we don't know if the ink is good for them.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's and so this is, we can't not say that this has a very clear demonic dimension. And so therefore, there was a time when when seeking that third way was helpful, good, and laudatory. But as you said earlier, Rosaria, that's not what time it is now.
No,
Yeah, that's
not what time it is now.
I think the very nature of what it means to be a human being is at stake now.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And as we were talking to Mary Harrington earlier on, Todd, it's very clear. It's not just Christians who get that.
Right.
Any thoughtful human being who reflects on what's going on knows what's happening. And Mary Harrington is speaking out on these issues more courageously than our Christians.
Right.
You know, she's given public lectures, public anti-abortion lectures, and even anti-contraception lectures that have got her into a lot of trouble. But she understands that we're not debating the tax code here. We're not even debating mixed economy versus pure free market. We're actually debating what does it mean to be a human being at this point. And if Christians don't have clarity on that, what a total disaster. What a total disaster.
What's interesting, I think you've seen other unbelievers also advocating more forcefully for reality than believers. And I would say one of the reasons is that they don't have a false totem Jesus confusing what it means to be made in the image of God.
Yeah.
So our unbelievers have a clearer sense of reality than what we're seeing right now.
Well, they're waking up in Sweden before the United States are. They're waking up in Sweden and Norway. I mean,
some of the reason for that, of course, is Islamic immigration. I mean, what's interesting is that the Muslims I know are very clear, and I'm happy to stand shoulder to shoulder with them on this issue. They're very clear on this issue. And it's going to be very interesting to see how the left play that, because at the moment, my Muslim friends tell us we enjoy protection from the left because we're kind of a minority, Islamophobia, et cetera, et cetera. But they've also said to me, but the time is coming where we know that's going to run out. Because bottom line is, we're not going to take this LGBT stuff indefinitely.
But I don't think Christians can just leave it there. So, I hear this a lot. I hear this from some conservative think tanks. You know, this is all about reality. Let's just go there. No, because what we are seeing, especially with detransitioners, is that we are seeing people whose bodies are completely devastated. And the same mental health issue that led them to mutilate their bodies didn't go away because they did, and they've changed their understanding of that. And so the church needs to be ready to receive with open arms people who have lost everything on the ground of this new gender ideology. And in fact, I would say those people, once they are in faith, have such a clear grasp of the gospel because they understand that in the New Jerusalem, they will be the man they were meant to be and the woman they were meant to be, and that nothing can mock God, even even when the world, the flesh, and the devil get Christian parachurch ministries to join them in this vile sin. But this is where we just say, not on my watch. I might just be a cranky homeschooling Christian grandma, but I know a fool when I see one.
Yeah. And that's, I think, a beautiful place to end. What you made an appeal for there, Rosaria, is not only for a firm stand on the truth, but a firm stand on God's grace. Not only an acknowledgement of the importance of what it means to be a human being, but the importance of what it means to be an individual human person as well. And I think that one of the dangers of times of cultural tension and polarization, of course, is that we can dehumanize those with whom we disagree. And it's very important that we all repent of that, pray that the Lord will protect us from that, and deal with the broken and damaged people who cross our paths in ways that our Lord himself would have done. Well, thanks very much, Rosaria, for being on the program today. We eagerly look forward to the publication of your next book, 5 Lies of Our Anti-Christian Age. And to anyone listening, if you would like to visit our website, mortificationofspin.org, you will have a chance to enter there to win a copy of Rosaria's new book. If you don't win a copy, then please buy one anyway. It comes, I think, with a foreword from our friend Kevin DeYoung, and will no doubt be an extremely helpful resource for those of us facing questions that seem to become more complicated and come at us even more fast day by day. All that remains for me now is to thank our guest, Rosaria Butterfield, for being with us once again, and to thank you, our listeners, for tuning in. When you're at our website, please, if you feel led, do make a donation so that the Alliance can continue doing the work that it does. And all that remains otherwise is to say thank you very much for being with us, and we look forward to being with you next time.
Thanks for listening to Mortification of Spin, a podcast of the Alliance of Confessing Evangelicals. For more on topics like this, visit mortificationofspin.org, where you can find other articles by Carl and Todd, browse the archive of past episodes, and make a donation. We'll talk to you next time on Mortification of Spin.